A number of years ago, a man by the name of Moshe Erlanger, an Israeli Jew, went to Germany for business before Yom Kippur. Because of weather problems in Germany, his flight from Frankfurt to Tel Aviv got delayed, and at some point they notified him that Ben Gurion Airport is closed for Yom Kippur and he cannot make it home for Yom Kippur. Disappointed, he called home, shared with his wife and family that he won't be home for Yom Kippur. The first time since his wedding that he would not pray Yom Kippur in the shul where he moved. He booked a hotel near the great shul of Frankfurt. He walks to the great shul moments before Yom Kippur. He had his talit, his prayer shawl, but he didn't have the prayer book for Yom Kippur. He didn't have the white coat, which we call the kittel. He's sitting there. In Yiddish, the word would be fahakt, despondent, dejected, frustrated, annoyed. You know that feeling? You're out of your comfort zone. He really felt, just like completely out of place. And then the cantor went up and started. Ahai, 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 Kol Nidre. The cantor's name was Tzadok Greenwald, also a Jew from Israel, who would fly in every year for the high holy days to Frankfurt to serve as the chazan, as the cantor in the great synagogue of Frankfurt. And he led the congregation, a few thousand Jews, with passion and enthusiasm, to the point that in the middle of Kol Nidre, the cantor broke down sobbing. And Moshe from Israel never heard such a Kol Nidre. He never heard such emotion. He never heard such passion. He never saw such concentration. He himself was moved to tears. And after the davening, after the services, he went to thank the cantor. And they got into a little schmooze. What are you doing here? I got stuck. And the cantor says, I come from Israel too every year. My parents were Holocaust survivors, so it's very meaningful for me to be able to lead the services Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in the re-established Jewish community in Germany after the Second World War, in this great synagogue which remained from pre-Holocaust Germany. And Reb Tzadok says, maybe God wanted you here so that you should appreciate Yom Kippur. He said, I'm asking myself the same question, but I'm also asking, what made you so emotional by Kol Nidre? What was it? What's the story? And he says to him, a few years ago, I prayed. And those of you who are cantors know Yom Kippur is not an easy day. Kol Nidre and morning and the afternoon, Shacharit, Musaf, Mincha, Ne'ilah, and Reb Tzadok was doing everything. And at the end of that day, he was knocked out. A parched voice after singing a whole day, and the voice resonating in the great synagogue of Frankfurt, he was really ready for a cold drink of water, a nice Jewish bite, and a good night's sleep in the Frankfurt hotel, getting ready to go back home for the holiday of Sukkot in the Holy Land where Tzadok lived. He walks out of shul, he puts away his cantorial garments and attire. Janitor shuts the lights, and as he walks out the front gates and he closes the gates which lock, he sees a Jew, bewildered, standing in front of the gate. He looked like in his 60s, and with a mixed accent of German, Russian, and Yiddish. He says, "Far was seien die Teuren von der Schul vermacht?" Why are the gates to the synagogue locked? Is Heim bei Nacht nicht Yom Kippur? He says, I came here for Kol Nidre. I came here for Yom Kippur. It's usually packed. There's usually 2,000 people. Why are the gates locked? Tzadok Greenwald says, I didn't have a heart to tell him. I was quiet. He says, answer me, why are the gates locked? At this point, the Jew is very agitated. He's nervous. He's somewhat frantic. I have no choice, Tzaddik says, to tell him the truth. And I say, my dear Yidala, I'm so sorry. Yom Kippur was last night. The Jew breaks down sobbing. Oi, oi, oi. Reb Tzaddik says, why are you sobbing? He says, you don't understand. My parents barely survived the Holocaust, and then they assimilated. They did not want to have to do anything with Judaism. They suffered too much. But one thing my father would do, he would go to synagogue on the night of Yom Kippur, and before he died, he said, we are an assimilated Jewish family. Aber Juden seien wir, but we're Jewish. And he says, how do you know that you're Jewish? When you go to synagogue on Yom Kippur. That's how you know you're Jewish, and you're connected to 4,000 years of Jewish history. And he looks at the cantor and he says, in my life, I never missed Yom Kippur Kol Nidre. When my father was alive and after he died, this year is the first time, at last, I'm not Jewish anymore. That's why I'm crying. Tzaddik Greenwald knew exactly what he has to do. He put his hand on the Jew's shoulders and he said, come with me. He opens the gate, takes him into shul, puts on his talis, his kittel, his chazan hat, puts this Russian German Jew right near him, and he says, we're going to do Kol Nidre. You and me and God. And he starts singing Kol Nidre. Ahai, 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 ahai. And Tzaddik says, I'll tell you the truth. I'm a professional cantor. Usually when I get up, there's 2,000 people. You know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking a little bit about God, but what am I mostly thinking about? I got to impress the people. I want to impress the board of directors. I need a contract for next year. I want to get some compliments. I need some validation. I want to do a good job. I want to be liked. I want them to have a meaningful experience. But here, I was alone. There was not one person in the shul. There was an old Jew, an assimilated Jew who knew nothing. Who was I singing for? But I felt God's presence with this Jew. And I broke down, crying. And I sang Kol Nidre, and I felt all of Jewish history coming to life at that moment. I finished the Kol Nidre. We say the Shema together. I give him a big hug and a big kiss, and I say, my Jew, we just celebrated Yom Kippur and Kol Nidre. The Jew looks at me and he says in Yiddish, you will never know what you did for me. And he went home. And I went home. The next year, I come to synagogue. He's there on Yom Kippur, sitting in the front, comes over to me. He says, you remember me? I said, of course I remember you. He says, what you did for me, nobody but me and God will understand. Rabbi Tzaddik says, every year since, when I say Kol Nidre, I go back to that moment. And it's so moving for me. It's so emotional for me. I cry. I heard this. Reb Moshe shared this. He heard it from Chazan Tzaddik Greenwald. And I thought to myself, you know, this story is so applicable not only in Frankfurt am Main at the Rhine River, how applicable this story is in the United States of America at the 21st century. Even for all of us good Jews who come to the synagogue Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but we find the gates closed. No, I don't mean the physical gates. I mean our emotional gates, our spiritual gates. We often feel unmoved, uninspired, alienated, sometimes angry, dejected, apathetic, indifferent. We often feel that the gates to our own heart, to our own soul are locked. Yeah, we go through the ritual. We have our seats, we have our tickets, we go through the roads, we have the prayer books. But my inner soul is often locked. I'm indifferent. There's a certain lifelessness, a numbness. just doesn't speak to me. I may be there in the right time, in the right place, but emotionally, I don't feel present. Because very often, we look at this month and there's an element of dread, an element of fear. We call it Yamim Noraim, an element of awe. And it's true, there's an element of awe. But underlying the story of awe is a story of profound and infinite love. It's a story about the ultimate belief of Judaism, that all of my trauma, all of my insecurities, all of my pain, all of my jealousy, all of my depression, all of my agony, anger, they may be true and real and authentic and cause me pain, but they could not constitute your core self, which remains wholesome, holy, and no experience in life, and not even mistakes that you have made or that I have made, and not even abuse that has been done to me by others willingly, maliciously, or even unwillingly, can snuff out, can obliterate, can compromise, can even dilute the truth of your internal wholesomeness and holiness. And thus the main process is to really work through the debris, not to allow myself to be defined by external layers, but to excavate and to find that core, powerful, divine self. Who am I? I am an ambassador of God in this world. Are there other voices in me that give me other messages? Of course there are. You must always remember that there's a relationship that could never be locked. There is a relationship that could never be compromised. There is an authentic spiritual connection that every single person has, which nothing and nobody can ever compromise, because it's within each and every person to be able to open those gates physically and mentally. You were always connected. You are forever connected. You will forever be connected, because who are you? You are essentially an ambassador of love in this world.
TheYeshiva.net